So, Rugby World Cup 2011, before we actually go to New Zealand, come back to World Cup 2007, knocked out in the quarterfinals against France. And that was probably the start then of the road to 2011. Can you recall what it was like in that dressing room after the quarterfinal against France when you were beaten in Cardiff?
Yeah, for sure. I was pretty young. I was one of the younger members of the team then, and I hadn't played in the game, but sitting and seeing, some of my sort of heroes that I was playing with, just broken over a game of rugby, which for me still feels wrong. I know what World Cups are like, and I know the pressure that players are under, but to still see those sort of scenes and that sort of heartache, it's still. It's tough to take for anyone, particularly for a young player. Let's say looking up at these guys who were broken in tears. Anton Oliver, Chris Jack, all of these guys have been in the All Black team for a long time, and their dream of finishing with a World Cup victory, had been shattered in a game that they'll still, I'm sure, will be a black mark in their minds. It's the way it is for rugby players. So it was certainly a hurt, and I think looking back, like you say, it did, as much as it hurt, it led to a lot of change within the All Blacks, and they, I think, in a smart move, they kept the the majority of the coaching team together, and kept faith with a lot of the players. Obviously, a lot moved on, but the guys that stayed in New Zealand were still selected, and that sort of group formed the basis, of the team that went on for the next 4 years to prepare for a chance of sort of redemption and to win a World Cup at home.
Were you surprised in the fallout from '07 that Graham Henry and his backroom staff were kept on? Because there was a lot of talk about Robbie Deans, and there was a lot of talk about what might happen.
I don't know if I was surprised. I mean, I was happy. Because that's one of the things that hurts the most when you go through a result like that. Is you feel like all the good work is going to be overlooked, and I felt like anyone in that team. There were things that we did wrong, but there was so much that we did well, and that just so quickly gets swept away when you have a result like that. And that's rugby, that's sport. You live and die by that. But so I suppose what I'm saying is I was happy. I didn't. I wasn't never a player to take much attention of what the mood was like. I didn't read papers and things, so I didn't know. I knew, obviously, with being in Kiwi, you're aware of how badly the result would have gone down with New Zealand, but I was still confident that, I knew the coaching team was the best coaching team I'd ever had, and I knew they were very, very good. So I was obviously a player in the mix, so for them to still be there and the chance to prove myself again for them and within the team was a good thing for me, I thought.
And then moving into 2008 and 2009, did you become one of the senior players automatically? I know there was a group of about 7 or 8 players who maybe took the lead outside of the coaching team. Were you automatically one of those senior players, or how did that group work, and what was the dynamic there?
Especially 2008. So it was the first time that's when me and Ma started playing together in the midfield. World Cup, the following Tri-Nations, and they were my first games, even in a Tri-Nations as it was then. Up until then, I'd only played on India tours. I was young. I was sort of a development player, and I had a few injuries, so I certainly wasn't a leader at that stage. And then I think it was about 2009, or even 2010, when we'd had leadership groups before that, but that was when I was sort of up to come into the group. And I think because there was another big moment in terms of All Black development at that period was 2009, when we lost 3 tests to South Africa, and that was a big learning curve for us all. And I know that was on the back of that, we sort of placed a lot more emphasis on our leadership group. And so that was really, where I felt my involvement was, but it's really started from about 2009, 2010.
And did you look, Conrad, at what had been done in 07, but also kind of what was not done in 07 to win a World Cup, and say, right, let's see what we can implement here going towards 2011 in New Zealand?
Yeah, for sure. That was a big part of it. And to be honest, I know within the wider public, you start talking about World Cups as soon as one finishes, you start thinking about the next one. But for players, especially All Blacks, we just, as much as we had in mind towards 2011, as players, 2008 was just about sort of getting credibility and respect back to the All Black jersey that we felt we'd probably lost with our quarterfinal exit. So for the couple of years there, I know we weren't thinking about a World Cup at that stage. That sort of obviously came into the picture, when we got a bit closer. The coaches might have thought about it earlier on, but, for players, it was sort of only probably at the end of 2010 and then in 2011 itself.
And then, of course, 2011 itself started with everyone talking about the World Cup that was going to be hosted in New Zealand. And then you had the Christchurch earthquake and the Pike River mine disaster, which, a bit like our current situation here with the coronavirus, just puts rugby into perspective. How did those events impact on players in New Zealand? Not even just the All Blacks, but just rugby and rugby players in New Zealand. And, because a lot of the guys were from Christchurch and had to deal with the actual realities of this earthquake, especially.
Yeah, I mean, it changed. Obviously, it took place early part of Super Rugby, and obviously it affected the Crusaders the most, being, a team based there, and they played the entire competition on the road. And then for us, playing games there, we were travelling to different places. But yeah, you're right, the effect was sort of bigger than that. And yeah, I suppose it puts the game into perspective, and for New Zealanders as well, it was maybe a good thing. We stopped being obsessed with the World Cup for a few months, and we're worried about how everyone was, and it wasn't till really at the end of that Super Rugby season that sort of the focus shifted back to that World Cup. But for players, obviously, right through the build up, it was a big focus of ours to give something back to the city of Christchurch. And I know we based ourselves, we knew we were going to play games there, but we spent a lot of time down there and visit, the city, and tried to make them feel, lift the spirits a little bit of that community. And it was something, it was pretty close to the group, and something we talked about a lot and used, I think, as a little bit of motivation, throughout the World Cup.
Jump forward now to the actual tournament, and Auckland is absolutely packed. Tonga was the opening game, your first match, and there was hackers going on all over the city, and it was just crazy. Was that sense of kind of national pride, and we're hosting this tournament, was that extra pressure for you guys, or was it one of those things that just carried you into the tournament in a really positive frame of mind?
Yeah, it was obviously something we'd talked about a lot. And about dealing with the pressure, and how we were going to have to react to it. And I think, looking back, it was something we put a lot of time into, and it was time well spent. I just remember really enjoying it. Like, there was obviously pressure there, and we weren't going to hide away from it. But the fact, we took little steps that we hadn't done before in previous World Cups. Like, we wanted to stay based, in the heart of the cities and actually really enjoy it. Like, you talk about, the buzz of the World Cup, and on the viaduct, particularly in Auckland at the start. And we were just up the road, and that was brilliant. Rather than, what we'd done in other World Cups, find a hotel right out of the city and sort of feel like it's going to take the pressure off. I we'd learned that's the wrong approach, but to actually embrace it and try and, get a sense of the occasion, and use that as motivation. I think that was really good. The guys were, when the time the game came along, sure, there was pressure, but, we were up for it, and we really enjoyed it.
And the games went on, and things kicked off, and New Zealand embraced it. And it was all going well then until Dan Carter went down in training. And also Richie McCaw, towards the end of the tournament then, wasn't training. He had some kind of foot injury. Are those the things that you prepare for in advance and just deal with it when it happens? Is that kind of, what they talk about, that staying strong mentally, even though your playmaker is gone and your captain you rely on is struggling?
Yeah, well, I think what we did, when you, like we mentioned before, looking back on our failures at World Cups, it wasn't because we weren't prepared. If anything, we were over prepared. Our form going into every World Cup was brilliant. We had great squads, we had great players, but we weren't dealing with the unexpected, which World Cups throws out. You've got teams that coming to play and they're going to play better than they ever have. There'll be teams. This is our past record, was that we were getting, surprised, I suppose, because of the teams that we'd met for 3 or 4 years leading up to World Cup. We'd be easily, but they were playing a brand of football, or the players were producing rugby that we'd never seen, and it was sort of catching us off guard. And so if there was anything we were going to do this time, is to be prepared for abnormalities, for teams to play out of their skin, for referees' calls to not go away, for the weather, or for injuries. And we said before, we're never going to guess how it's going to go wrong for us, but it will go wrong. And it proved to be correct. We never talked about 3 first fives getting injured. Our other Mills Muraina, the other guy I often forget. He was our, behind Dan, Mills was the man with the most tests, and he went down injured, and suddenly I was the most kicked back, and it kept me awake at night, I can tell you. So little things like that, it just started from early on. The way we were losing players, but instead of getting nervous, it was sort of like, okay, this is what we talked about. This is what we knew. This is the thing that's going to try and unsettle us, and we've just got to do our best to keep on task and not make the mistakes we had in the past, and actually just keep playing good footy and try and win rugby games.
You got past Australia in the semi-finals, and then France 8-7 in the final. Probably one of the most tense matches ever played at that level. Do you have any one particular memory from that final?
If there was one, just, because I get asked about it a lot, it was waiting for them to kick. They had a kick to go ahead, and talking to Brad Thorne and Richie and saying, like I was saying before, like, this is what we expect. We at that stage, it just wasn't going well for us. And we had said, again, in the lead up, there'd be a game, maybe 2 games like this, where despite our preparation and, who knows what, things just we weren't going to wipe the opposition off the field. We were going to have to grind this out. And I was expecting the kick to go over, and I was just talking about how we were going to go down and get 3 points, and what we could do. And I was strangely calm. And I just remember talking about, like, all right, let's go get 3 points, because it wasn't working. Obviously, Donald on the stage, the boys were a bit rattled, and it didn't feel like we were going to score tries, but I still felt, we can win this game. We just get back down their half, get 3 points, and then obviously the kick missed, and we just held on.
And was it a relief then at the final whistle?
Yeah, very much. It was even. It's not something a lot of guys will say. You don't sort of, not straight away, but I still sort of remember big Ali Williams, throwing him in the air, and he sort of. I just remember not even having the energy to celebrate. It was just like, it was a great feeling, don't get me wrong, but it's one that doesn't sort of sink in straight away. It's takes a bit of time.
Let's look forward. Let's move on then to 2015, Conrad. And in terms of forward planning, you said earlier, like, the players don't get immersed in that because it's really just about, taking your holidays then and getting back into Super Rugby or whatever. But in terms of you, Dan Carter, Richie McCaw, all took sabbaticals. Was that something that was written into contracts, or was that something that the NZ or you wanted you guys to do to look forward to 2015?
No, that was all. Yeah, it was all very, very personal. And it's probably reflected in the what we all did. It was Dan wanted to go play overseas. It was something he was passionate about. For me, it was I just wanted to travel around the world with my wife and, see a few things. So, and then Rich, he just wanted a break, I think. He played obviously so much footy and that was more for his body. But yeah, so it was just a matter of renegotiation with New Zealand, and, all of us were different, but we all wanted to stay in New Zealand, but they were aware of the toll it was taking. So, when it came to the contract, it was sort of just them asking you, what do you want? And, then finding a way through it. And so I think that's all how it happened.
And in terms of the fact that a lot of players are probably on an enforced sabbatical now and certainly for the next few weeks, is it something you'd recommend? Is it something that was good for your body, especially at that age and having played so many caps, both internationally and with Super Rugby?
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose for me it was, I played through a period where it went from what I felt, a normal season was quite manageable. You could play every game, and you probably not even hit 30 games, to where, by the end you could easily play, mid-30s. And I only had sort of one season, and I knew it was too much. I got to an India tour, which when I started my career, the India tours were out and out my favourite time of year. You'd normally play your Tri-Nations, have a good little break, and then come into India tour. It was, you were fresh. You knew you were having a big break after that, where, but pretty quickly, 5 or 6 years later, the Rugby Championship ran straight into the India tour. And by the end of it, and our results showed when, I started at India tours, we were amazing for 4 weeks. And then we were suddenly dropping games, particularly at the end of our tour. We just weren't as sharp. And obviously the Northern Hemisphere team started, I think, playing a little bit better. But yeah, it was an effect on the players and the team as a whole. So, for me, it was always obvious, I'd always play a lot better rugby when decent break and my body felt fresh.
And I suppose then going forward to the tournament in 2015, South Africa upset by Japan very early. Had you guys been, and you talked about Northern Hemisphere teams playing that bit better, had you guys looked at the threats? I know you All Blacks always talk about we only focus on ourselves, but had you looked at some of the threats from teams like Ireland and England? Obviously, England as hosts were probably the number one going into it from the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you asked most guys. I've said it before. I think England were the team that worried me the most. They'd beaten us pretty well. It was a couple of years before that World Cup, but and they had a good group of players. I think in Stuart Lancaster there was a new coach that had given the team I don't know. It was an attitude about them. Which we expected, I think it's fair to say, a little bit more than in the past, whereas, and because they were, that they played a really good brand of football, they're approachable, there was noticeable difference in their attitude after games, even when they had the 3-test tour down in New Zealand, they were, we had a whole lot more respect for them, I think it's fair to say, and going into that, it was, there was been a few nerves about meeting them, in a final. I think if we'd both progressed at the top of our pools, we would have met them in a final. And they were one team, and obviously Ireland, the form they'd shown, and the whole lot of them. I'd say by that stage the tours were getting a lot harder, and we were dropping games because the teams in the north were playing a lot better rugby.
And so you got through the pools, you hammered France in the quarterfinal, which kind of put 2007 to bed. You beat South Africa in the rain in the semi-finals, and then on to Australia in the final. After kind of 2 months away, all those matches back to back, media commitments, activations, fans, travelling around, hotels, buses, are you relying on adrenaline at the very end of a Rugby World Cup to get you through the big test in the 7th match at the very end, which is the pinnacle of the 4-year cycle?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're pretty well managed, like I think the All Blacks particularly, do a great job of looking after us both through the year and then even through the tournament itself. Like there would have been no one, in our starting 15. I don't think that would have started every match. Certainly wouldn't have played 80 minutes of most of the games. So and yeah, obviously to be at a World Cup final, so you're well looked after. The training's very minimal by that stage. Final week, I remember we might, one Thursday training that would be at full level, full intensity for all of 10, 15 minutes. So, but other than that, it's a big mental game, and everyone's at the top of their game because it is a World Cup final. If you've managed it well, then your body's in good shape too. So, I know myself, to that final was, feeling great, and that's probably a credit as much to the coaching staff and the medical team as to, the group of us players that knew that's where we wanted to be. So I think that's the way we sort of planned the whole year, really.
And then you won it. And I'm sure it was nice to win against the old enemy that was Australia. I suppose the final question, Conrad, you did, you and your team did the back-to-back, and then you moved up to France to play and eventually coach in Po. Do you think it's possible for the All Blacks to do a back-to-back Rugby World Cup win again, given that so many guys are now moving north way before they finished their time with New Zealand, and it obviously, for financial reasons or whatever, it's harder for New Zealand to keep that talent, that brain drain to Europe is an issue.
I don't know. To be honest, I've never thought of it like that. I'd hate to say it was impossible, because I know that would be, as if, when I was an All Black, if I heard that would be the number one motivation to go do it. So, I'd never say that would beyond an All Black team. But you are right, no doubt in saying it's going to get harder and harder. The reason for me that it will continue to get harder is that the game is just becoming more and more global, and so not just the talent that New Zealanders look in player wise, but I think the IP that's just being spread around the world. And so now you're just going to see, Northern Hemisphere teams, as long as they have great competitions, which they do, and great, levels, and then they'll just get better and better. And so it'll be harder when you get to a World Cup, when they're more and more competitive, to be the one that happens to win it. It's just going to be, as the margins are so small. So then to do that again, 4 years later, it's going to require a bit of luck. Probably we needed a bit of luck to get it, twice. South Africa needed a bit of luck to win it this time around. So that's why I think it's going to be harder and harder. You look at the course of World Cups over time, there are more and more teams capable of winning it, and I cannot see that changing. And so that's why it'll be harder for any team to win it back to back in the years to come.
Perfect. Listen, Conrad, great to chat to you, and thanks very much for taking the time.
Not a problem. Pleasure.